My name is Martha. I'm 39 years old, a mother of two, Samuel, who's 15 and growing faster than I can keep up with, and Ava, who's 10 going on 20. We live in a quiet neighborhood on the north side of the city, in a rented but cozy two-bedroom apartment with sun-streaked windows and the kind of kitchen that always smells faintly like cinnamon. We're not rich, but we're good. The bills are paid on time, there's always food in the fridge, and my kids have what they need, emotionally too, not just physically. That's a point of pride for me. It wasn't always like that. I work as a property manager now. It's not glamorous, but it suits me. I've always been good at managing chaos, tight schedules, difficult tenants, repair crews that never show up when they're supposed to. It's a job that expects you to juggle 10 things at once and somehow smile through it. I don't mind. It keeps me sharp, keeps me moving. And there's something deeply satisfying about fixing what other people see as a mess. Maybe because I've had to do that in my own life more than once. People look at me today, steady job, polite kids, clean apartment, and they assume I've had it all figured out for years, that I was lucky or careful or married well. They don't know the half of it. They don't know the nights I spent awake doing math on the back of an old envelope, trying to stretch $100 into rent, groceries, and bus fare. They don't know how many times I've had to choose between paying a bill or buying my son new sneakers after he outgrew his old ones practically overnight. And they definitely don't know the kind of man I used to come home to, but I'm not going to talk about that yet, because this story isn't about him, not at its heart. It's about something else entirely. It's about what happens when a woman finally sees herself clearly, without the noise, the shame, or the expectations. Most evenings, I get home around 6. Ava is usually at the table doing her homework, her little brows furrowed like the world depends on her getting each word perfect. Sam is in his room, headphones on, pretending not to be as thoughtful as he actually is. We eat together, even if it's just takeout. I insist on that. Phones down, real conversation. Our life is simple, but it's ours. We make pancakes on Sunday mornings. We dance in the kitchen when a good song comes on. We argue over movie picks and laugh until someone spills something. It's not perfect. What is? But it's solid, peaceful, honest. And for a long time, I didn't think I'd ever have that. I used to live in a different place. Not just a different city, but a different version of myself. Smaller, quieter, always half apologizing for something. Too tired, too emotional, too ambitious. Back then, I couldn't imagine the kind of life where I could just breathe without watching my words or covering for someone else's mistakes. You get used to things when you live like that. You convince yourself that unpredictability is normal, that it's okay to constantly be patching holes, financial, emotional, spiritual, just to keep the roof from caving in. You tell yourself you're doing it for the kids, or because love means patience, or because he's just going through something. But deep down, you know, even if you can't admit it to yourself yet. I look back now and realize how much of myself I was willing to give up just to keep the illusion alive. How many lines I let him cross because drawing one felt like giving up. I spent years being the glue in a life I didn't even like, and yet I don't regret all of it, because if I hadn't lived that way, if I hadn't felt that suffocation, I might never have fought so hard to breathe. Now I wake up each morning knowing I'm not walking on eggshells. I know my car keys will be where I left them. I know my money won't vanish overnight. I know that the voice my kids hear when they wake up belongs to someone calm and present, not someone anxious or bitter or afraid. There's power in that. There's power in reclaiming a life. And if someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd be here, stable, centered, raising 2 incredible kids in a city I chose, I might have laughed or cried or both. But here I am. And everything that happened before, it brought me here, even the worst of it, even her. But I'll get to that. Not yet. First, I need to tell you how it all started to unravel. How I began to see clearly even when it hurt, especially then, because the truth isn't always sharp like a knife. Sometimes it's slow, heavy, like a breath you didn't realize you were holding. And when it finally escapes your chest, you realize you've been waiting your whole life to let it go. The unraveling didn't happen all at once. It rarely does. It starts in the quiet, in the things you try to ignore, glances that last too long at his phone, vague stories that change slightly each time he tells them, moments where you catch your own reflection in a mirror and wonder when your eyes started looking so tired. Before everything exploded, life with Luis had already become a kind of endurance test. There were still the good days, of course. That's how it works, isn't it? Enough decent mornings and passable dinners to keep you from admitting the rest. He could be funny. He could be gentle. He could make the kids giggle so hard they snorted. But those moments started feeling like borrowed time, and in between were stretches of silence, long, complicated silences, where I could feel things slipping through my fingers and had no idea how to stop it. Luis had always been a risk taker. At least that's what he called it. I used to mistake it for confidence when we were younger. Now I know better. It wasn't confidence. It was recklessness dressed in charm. He would borrow money from people, sometimes friends, sometimes people he barely knew, and then pretend he forgot. Sometimes he'd lie straight to my face about it, and then a week later, I'd get a message on social media or someone knocking on the door asking when we were going to pay them back, and I'd pay them. Every time. Not because I believed him anymore, but because I couldn't stand the idea of someone thinking we were cheats. I didn't want my kids growing up with that kind of shadow hanging over them. So I took on extra clients, sold a necklace my grandmother gave me, dipped into our rent money more than once. I remember one night he came home at 2 a.m, his shirt untucked, eyes glassy, smiling like nothing was wrong. I was sitting on the edge of our bed in the dark. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at him, willing him to say something real. "Relax," he muttered, already unzipping his jeans. I had a few drinks. "Don't start." That was always his line. Don't start. As if silence was some kind of agreement, as if by not yelling I'd given permission. But the moment that broke something in me, the moment that snapped whatever thread I was still holding on to, didn't come from money. It didn't come from his gambling or the lies or the way I could no longer recognize the man I married. It came from her. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had just come back from Ava's piano recital. Luis had said he wasn't feeling great and stayed home. We brought back pizza. Ava was still in her dress, all flushed cheeks and excitement, and I just wanted to put my feet up for 5 minutes. But when I walked through the door, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I told Sam to help his sister change, and I walked toward the bedroom. At first, I thought the door was stuck, just pressed shut. But when I opened it, when I saw what was on the other side, time folded in on itself. She was older than me, mid-40s maybe. Heavy makeup, tacky heels kicked off on the floor. Her laugh filled the room like it belonged there, and Luis, my husband, lay there half naked, reaching lazily for a sheet that didn't come fast enough. And she, God, I still remember this. She looked at me and laughed like I was the joke, like the stupid wife who had walked in at the wrong part of a bad soap opera. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just stood there, frozen, my hands still holding Ava's recital program. "You should have called first," the woman said, smirking. And Luis, he just stared at me. No apology, no panic. Just this dull, detached look, like I'd interrupted something mildly inconvenient. He didn't even get up. I left the room. I went back into the hallway. I told Sam to take Ava to the park for ice cream, gave him cash, kissed them both. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. And then I called my sister. Within a week, I had packed everything that was mine and the kids. Within a month, the divorce papers were signed, and within 3 months, we were gone. Not just from the apartment, not just from Luis, but from the town, the state, the entire life I'd built trying to keep him together. We moved to the city, a place where no one knew us, where I didn't have to explain why my husband was missing from school events or why I flinched every time the phone rang after midnight. I found work fast. Took anything at first, clerical, temp, night shifts. I made it work. And slowly, things began to change. Not all at once, but I started to breathe differently. Lighter, clearer, and that was just the beginning. At first I was terrified. Not of being alone, but of failing, of dragging my kids from one hard place to another, only to find the same struggle waiting for us in a different zip code. I didn't know if I was strong enough to hold it all up by myself. Rent, food, school drop-offs, late-night illnesses, tears I couldn't fix with a Band-Aid. But the thing about fear is that it fades when you don't give it room to grow. I didn't have time to be scared. I had 2 kids watching my every move, learning from how I handled chaos. So I handled it. I got a job at a mid-sized property management firm downtown. It was supposed to be temporary, just something to get us by. But I caught on quickly. I knew how to talk to people, how to fix problems, how to balance urgency with calm. After 6 months, they offered me a full-time position. A year later, I was leading a small team. I could breathe again. The kids adjusted too. Faster than I did in some ways. The city offered things our old town never could. Museums, libraries with more than 5 shelves, parks that didn't feel like afterthoughts. For the first time in years, we were surrounded by possibility. It felt like moving into color after living in black and white. One night, after Ava's school play, we stopped for hot chocolate at this little cafe a few blocks from home. She was still wearing her paper crown from the show, beaming. Sam teased her gently about forgetting one of her lines, and she rolled her eyes like only a 10-year-old can. And I sat there, watching them, realizing that I didn't miss him. Not even a little. Not his smirks, not his apologies, not the weight of his irresponsibility. Luis had been the kind of man who dragged light from a room the way some people pull curtains closed. And for years, I had convinced myself that was just part of marriage, compromise, endurance, for better or worse. But what no one tells you is that sometimes the worse is who they are, not what they go through. The city gave me more than opportunity. It gave me perspective, distance. A long enough pause to really see the past clearly, like holding an old photograph at arm's length and finally noticing the details. The shadow in someone's expression, the way their hands never touch yours. I didn't hear much from Luis after we left. He tried to reach out a few times, a voicemail here, a vague text there. Nothing consistent, nothing helpful. He claimed he wanted to see the kids, but it was always on his schedule. Always when it was convenient for him, and always with strings attached. The last time he called, he asked if I could spot him a little, until his next job came through. I hung up without answering. That was over a year ago. From what I've heard through people who still live back there, things haven't gone well for him. The woman I caught him with, she left. Or maybe he left her. Either way, it didn't last. His gambling got worse. He bounced between part-time gigs and cheap motels, burned a lot of bridges. Word is, he's couch surfing now, blaming everyone but himself for why nothing ever works out. Meanwhile, we've built something real. Sam started his first part-time job at a bookstore last month. Ava wants to learn to skateboard, even though she's scared of falling. I tell her it's okay to be scared. What matters is showing up again after the fall. I still wake up early, still stretch the groceries, still file paperwork late into the night when I need to, but I do it in a home that feels safe, in a life I'm proud of, in a city that's become ours. Sometimes, after the kids are asleep and the apartment goes quiet, I look around and let myself feel the enormity of it all. Not the pain, but the becoming. The shift from surviving to living, from dimming yourself for someone else to lighting the whole damn room on your own. And sometimes, only sometimes, I think about the look on that woman's face, the one who laughed at me when I walked into my own bedroom. I wonder if she ever found someone worth laughing with instead of laughing at, because Luis, he was never the prize. He was just the lesson. And I was the one who got away. Some people think anger fades over time, that it softens, that you just grow past it. But no, not always. Some anger turns into something else, colder, more focused. Not rage exactly, not hate, more like a clean burn, a knowing. A certainty in your bones that you deserved better. And when I remember that afternoon, walking in and seeing that woman in my bed, in my sheets, her voice sharp with mockery, that smirk on her face as if I was the one trespassing. It all comes flooding back. There was this moment, a moment where I froze. Not because I was weak, but because I was witnessing something so surreal my brain couldn't immediately wrap around it. Louise, lying there like a teenager caught at a sleepover. Her older than me, sloppier than me, barely covering herself with the blanket. The cheap perfume hanging in the air like a bad joke. And the worst part? He looked bored. Like I had interrupted him during a commercial break. I remember my throat tightening. The pressure building behind my eyes, like grief and humiliation, had linked arms and decided to crash through me at the same time. But I didn't cry. I did not cry in front of them. I just turned around and left. Calm, mechanic. Not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I knew if I opened my mouth, I'd scream until my lungs tore apart. Later that night, after sending the kids away with my sister, I sat alone in the dark and let it hit me. All of it. The years I spent cleaning up his messes, lying for him, scraping together rent money because he couldn't hold on to a paycheck, the phone calls from strangers asking when we'd pay him back, the sudden business ideas that always cost more than we had, the nights he disappeared without warning, and the mornings he came home with nothing but excuses and stale cologne on his jacket. I thought the gambling was bad, but this was deliberate. This was him choosing to humiliate me, not just cheat, humiliate. With her, someone so beneath even his low standards, it was almost laughable. Except it wasn't funny, it was devastating, and yet, it was the clearest moment of my life. A crack of lightning through the fog I'd been walking in for years. I remember whispering to myself that night, over and over, "You're done, you're done, you're done." And I was. The weeks that followed were chaos. I filed for divorce. I took what little money we had left, opened a separate account, and started looking for apartments. He begged at first, cried, threw guilt like darts, said I was overreacting, said I was ruining our family. Then he got mean, threatening, told me I'd never make it without him, told me I was lucky he stayed as long as he did, said no one else would ever put up with me. I smiled. Because the thing about hitting rock bottom is that there's nothing left to fear. You've already seen the worst of someone, already stood in your own kitchen and felt the ground fall out beneath you. Once you've survived that, there's power in it, a stillness, like learning to breathe underwater. The day I drove away from that godforsaken town, the kids asleep in the back seat, my entire life packed into the trunk of a borrowed car, I didn't feel broken. I felt reborn. No, I didn't know how we'd make it, but I knew I would never let a man like Luis write the ending to my story. And I didn't. The city was overwhelming at first. The noise, the traffic, the sheer bigness of everything. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I felt anonymous. And there's something liberating about that, being a blank slate in a place where no one knows your history. I found work fast, started small, administrative assistant at a real estate office. But I learned fast. I worked overtime, took night courses, asked questions, showed up early, stayed late, and within a year they offered me a full-time role managing one of the mid-size properties. I'd go from being the one answering phones to being the one making decisions. It was a leap, but I took it. Because I wasn't scared anymore. The kids adjusted too. Sam started playing basketball. Ava made friends on the first day of school and never looked back. Our apartment was small but warm. I decorated it with thrift store finds and homemade curtains. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. No lies, no tension, no wondering if someone was about to pull the rug out from under us. And Luis? Oh, Luis. He tried to keep up the act for a while. Posted pictures online with her as if flaunting their disgrace somehow made it legitimate. Captioned them with things like, "Real love finally," and "No more drama." It was almost funny, in a tragic kind of way. But within a year, the post stopped. She was gone. His business folded. I heard through someone that he was living with a cousin, sleeping on a sofa, begging for rides to job interviews. Last I heard, he was working part-time at a gas station off the interstate. No car, no savings, just stories about how life cheated him. No, Luis, you cheated life, and it came back for what you owed. As for me, I walk tall, I pay my bills, I raise my children with joy, not fear. I come home to peace, not apologies, and every once in a while I catch myself smiling in the mirror, not because everything's perfect, but because I'm free. And nothing is worth more than that. There's something sacred about silence when it's no longer a threat. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, months after we'd moved, in that little apartment with the loose kitchen drawer and the heater that hummed like an old man snoring. At first, I sat up in a panic, heart pounding, expecting to hear raised voices, slammed doors, someone stumbling in after disappearing for hours. That had been my life for so long, my body still braced for chaos. But that night, like so many since, I realized the apartment was quiet. The kids were sleeping peacefully. No one was yelling, no one was lying, no one was hiding anything. I sank back into the pillow and cried, but not the way I used to. These were quiet, grateful tears, the kind that come when your nervous system finally understands you're safe. It wasn't a fairy tale. I wasn't suddenly living in luxury. There were still bills, still exhaustion, still moments where I second-guessed myself, especially when I saw other families with 2 parents at school functions or watched Ava's face drop when she had to explain that her dad doesn't live here anymore. But there was also laughter, spontaneous, belly-aching, joyful laughter. We made traditions: Sunday pancake mornings, Friday night movies with popcorn and juice boxes, handwritten notes in lunch bags. We carved out a life with love at the center, not fear. And the deeper I got into this new chapter, the more I saw who I had become. Not the scared, stretched-thin woman who whispered apologies to a man who didn't deserve her, but a version of myself I had only dreamed of. Capable, present, proud. The kind of mother my kids could lean on, not because I pretended to be perfect, but because I showed them what strength really looked like. One night, after Ava had gone to bed, Sam came into the living room holding a drawing she'd made. It was a stick figure of me holding hands with them, all 3 of us smiling under a sun that took up half the page. "She says you're her favorite person," he said, handing it to me. I looked down at the crayon lines, the crooked little hearts, and my throat tightened. "And what about you?" I asked. He shrugged in that cool teenage way, but there was a flash of softness behind it. "You're the only one who never left," he said. That means something. It meant everything because that was the truth. Through all the chaos, the lies, the betrayals, I had stayed. For them, for myself. Even when I was crumbling inside, I'd held us together, and not with some kind of superhuman strength, but with stubborn love. With late-night spreadsheets and early morning walks to daycare, with choosing every single day to try again. As time went on, Luis became less of a shadow and more of a footnote. His texts stopped. His calls dried up. Once in a while, someone from the old town would message me on social media asking if I'd heard the latest. I never responded. I didn't need to know anymore. But then one day, something happened. It was a regular Tuesday. I was picking up groceries, pushing a cart with Ava riding on the edge, her sneakers dangling, and I saw him, Luis, at the end of the frozen food aisle. He looked older, gaunt, hair thinning, his jacket too big for his frame, like he hadn't had anything tailored in years. He turned his head, and for a second, our eyes met. He froze. I didn't. I nodded. A calm, neutral nod. No smile, no scowl, just acknowledgement. Then I turned and walked past him toward the checkout. Ava asked if we could get popsicles. I said yes. I didn't look back. He didn't follow, and that was it. No confrontation, no melodrama. Just 2 people who had once shared a life, now standing in the same aisle like strangers. One carrying juice boxes and a child, the other carrying regrets. Later that evening, I told Sam I saw his father. "Did he say anything?" he asked, without much interest. "No," I said. "He didn't need to." Because he knew. He saw the difference. He saw what I had become without him, and that was the real justice. Not the pain he felt, not the losses he suffered, but the quiet, undeniable truth that I never needed him to rise. He thought I was the one who'd fall apart without him, but I was the one who grew. and from where I stand now, the view is better than I ever imagined.